38 soldiers or 11 soldiers with a jeep, so that's the reason why. This one is in metal, but the real one they were in plywood. The only part of metal that you could find was a thin layer in the front door to serve as protection. But that's it. Well, and so you have to know that the landing craft were carried into the fleet, and the fleet was 10 miles away from the shore. So the soldiers had to spend 2 hours and a half from the fleet to the beach inside the landing craft. So of course after 10 minutes they were totally drenched, and they were also totally seasick. And they were given some anti-seasickness pills, but the side effect of those pills was to knock them out. So a lot of soldiers arrived on the beach totally sick, and some of them just drowned, just died going into the sea. Wow. And so they are called Higgins boats because of this man, Andrew Jackson Higgins. He was a boat builder, and he has a factory of boats in New Orleans. And you can see that they are inspired by
I'm pushing my foot. You can't just stop.
They are inspired from the flatboat of the bayou. Show you that because it's a typical element of what we call the Atlantic Wall. I don't know if you heard about it before, but the Atlantic Wall, this is the name that we give at all the German defenses that Hitler put in place on the western coast of Europe. And usually it was composed by 3 levels of defense. So the first level were all the mines and all the obstacles on the beaches. So you have to imagine that all the beaches were covered with obstacles, and there were minefields. The second level of defense were anti-tank walls like this one. So every beach was closed with a huge wall to make it really difficult to break the front line. Actually, so this is the anti-tank wall on Utah Beach. Okay, so you can see it continues all the beach long. Okay, and so usually in the first wave you have a sort of demolition units, and their mission was to create a passage through those walls. And actually where we are right now, this is the very first passage that the soldiers managed to create to be able to break the front line and pass behind the German defenses.
Wow.
In this part of Normandy, they train the trotters, so with a sort of caddy behind the horse. And if you go more in the east of Normandy, they train the gallopers. And after the race, they cool down in the sea. I think it's a good... the sand is good.
Utah Beach.
So, let me show you on the map where we are. So we went in Bayeux this morning. We took, as I was telling you, the National 13, so big objective for the soldiers who arrive on Omaha Beach, and we are there, okay, on Utah Beach. So Omaha Beach is actually this way, and the cliffs that you're gonna see in front, that you can see in front of us, this is the Point du Hoc that we're gonna visit this afternoon. Wait, the German Bay. And so this is what we call the Cotentin Peninsula. All this sector is the landing sector of the paratroopers, and so the American soldiers who landed on Utah, their mission, their big objective was to go west and cut what we call the Cotentin Peninsula to be able to go north and take the big port of Cherbourg. You see? Okay. And so let me explain the landing on Utah. We talk a lot about Omaha Beach, and you know that it was a real massacre. But in opposite, Utah Beach, it was a real success as a landing. And for one specific reason. You know, before the landing of the soldiers on the beach, it was supposed to be a bombing of 45 minutes to destroy as much as possible all the German defenses in place. And what happened on Utah is that the bombings were really accurate. The last squadron of bombers managed to pass under the clouds. You know that it was really cloudy that day. They passed under the clouds, and they didn't bomb as usual from the sea to the land, but parallel to the shoreline. So they use the shoreline as a guideline, and one by one, pop, 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 they destroy all the German defenses settled on the top of the dunes. When the first wave of men arrived, there were only 2 machine guns left on the dunes. Okay, so quickly they managed to create this passage and empty the beach. It was the landing sector of the 4th Division. The general in charge was Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the son of the former president Theodore Roosevelt. He was not supposed to be there because, as you can see on this picture, he was in a bad physical condition and he was already 56 years old.
Yeah. Roosevelt,
Ouais, that's
Teddy,
it.
Teddy Jr.
Oui, c'est ça. But he made the request to be in the first wave with his men. He survived the day, but unfortunately he died a few weeks later in Normandy, but from a heart attack. Ouais. He's buried at the American Cemetery. I'm going to show you his grave this afternoon.
Oh.
So I have one question.
Oui.
So I see lots of low tide there.
It's middle tide. Oui.
How far were they able to come up with the boat?
So they arrive at really low tide
Yeah.
to avoid all the obstacles, okay? And low tide on Utah Beach, that represents 600 yards.
Okay,
Ouais, to go through under the German fire, so big difficulty.
got it.
Ouais, ouais. One thing, can you see the house over there? So this house was already there, and it was the marker for the landing. Excuse me. So the soldiers, they were supposed to arrive with the house on their left, like that, on their left, like on this picture. But you know, the sea was really rough, and due to the currents, all the soldiers were deported 1 mile to the east. So this is actually where they landed, but it was not supposed to be like this, but it was a good thing, because at this place the German defenses were really weak, so they quickly managed to create this passage and empty the beach. You have to imagine that 24,000 soldiers landed here on the day, and you can count only, if I can say only, 157 casualties. So nothing to do with Omaha Beach. paratroopers.
Right. So they had to go the other way and come in the other way.
Ouais.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it can be actually really high too. You know that the paratroopers, they were dropped during the night, a few hours before the men arriving on the beach, and they were supposed to prepare the ground for the troops coming, arriving on the beach. And so what happened in Sainte-Mère-Église, it's a little bit special. You know, of course, as you can assume, the paratroopers, they were supposed to get to be dropped outside the village, and they were supposed to take the village from the outside. But what happened in Sainte-Mère is that during the night, a fire started in a house. And the pilots mistook the light of the fire with the light of the pathfinders supposed to light the drop zone. So they started to drop the paratroopers inside the village and not outside as it was supposed to be. So that's the reason why you can see a paratrooper stuck at the spire. Fortunately for him, he was on the other side of the church. Otherwise he would have been killed because all the Germans were just right there watching at the fire. The fire was just right there. But he became deaf from one ear because the bells were ringing all the invasion. And so can you see that at the first spire, a quarter of the cross is missing over there. Because another one gets stuck at this spire, but as he was closer to the ground, he managed to escape by himself by cutting the ropes of his parachute. But this one was too high, so he faked death and he waited. Fortunately, the Germans were quickly surrounded by the paratroopers, so they decided to give up, to leave. But before leaving, two paratroopers went into the spire of the church to have a global vision of the situation. And at that moment, they realized that the soldier was stuck. So they made him prisoner, but he managed to escape a few hours later. So he survived D-Day, he survived the war, and in the 50s he was contacted by a journalist named Cornelius Ryan. He wanted to write a book about the landing called The Longest Day. And it was adapted into a movie a few years later. So this is John Steele, the paratrooper, when he gets stuck at the spire during the war, and when he came back to be the technical advisor for the movie The Longest Day. Okay? And so, as you can see, the town was really well preserved because there were no real battles. The stained glasses inside the church were destroyed and were replaced, and I just wanted to show you that before the museum.
She's not going to. She's not going to.
So this one, he was ordered by the civilians as a gift for the paratroopers. And this is the same than the older one, but they replace angels on each side of Mary by paratroopers.
Oh, that's the one I was looking at. Yeah.
Perfect. And you can see all the little parachute at the bottom. It's a big one. It was ordered by the civilians. They provide the 82nd Airborne Division for the 25th anniversary of D-Day. And so this is Saint Michael killing the dragon. They choose Saint Michael because Saint Michael is the patron but also the patron saint of the paratroopers. So that's the reason. And you can recognize the emblem of the 82nd, the All-Americans, the FA on the left, the regiment in French. At the top, the emblem of the paratroopers, at the bottom, the emblem of the pilots. And you have all the little FA in Europe. The lion for the German, the tulip for the Netherlands, of course, and the cross for France.
Wow.
This is the access that the Germans took to go into the spire of the church.
Oh.
You have a little stairs over there.
Juste là, déjà, t'en apprends le prix du reste. Puis t'as vu la coque? La coque, elle est neuve.
Little fields separated with huge hedgerows, like you can see.
You start at 6:30 a.m.
Oh, you're fine.
If you want the big ships to be able to come in, which they won't be able.
Remember we were talking about the Atlantic Wall this morning. I was telling you that it was composed by 3 levels of defense. So the first level, the mines and the obstacles. Second level, the anti-tanks walls closing all the beaches. And the third level were the base, the German bases. So you have to imagine that every 2 miles from Norway to the Spanish border of France, you will find a German base. So it was totally insane. And usually you have 3 sizes of base. So the smallest size, they are called Wilderstandnest in German. So it can be translated by nest of defense. And this is typically the type of base that you will find on the beach. Here it's a middle-sized one. It's called a Stützpunkt in German, so you can translate it by strong point. And the bigger base, they were called Festung. Festung means fortress, okay? And as you can assume, all the bigger German bases were around the ports, of course, and more in the north of France. So this is a map of England and of France. We are there. You can imagine that all the bigger German bases were right there in the north of France, because you can see the distance with England was way shorter. Here you can count 100 miles, here it's about 20 miles. So of course the Germans were expecting the landing to be in the north of France, okay? So on a middle-sized base, but it's still a big base, let me show you what it looked like from the sky. So from the sky, it's something like that. Okay, so you can see that we are on cliffs, and so it was really important for the Allies to take this base, because first it was really well armed with 6 cannons like this one. This is a 155 GPF. GPF, that means Grande Puissance Filou. That sounds French because actually this is a French cannon. Because you know, in 1940 when Germany invaded France, of course the army was disbanded, so the Germans were able to reuse all the equipment, okay? And as I was telling you, the soldiers were sent in factories and in work camps in Germany. So that's the reason why you have French cannons on a German base. And so, as you can see on this picture, you can clearly see the 6 gun emplacements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And actually, due to the position of the Point du Hoc, the Germans were able to reach Utah Beach on the west and Omaha Beach on the east, because the firing range of those cannons was about 12 miles. Oh, wow. Okay? Well, and so the mission was given to the 2nd Battalion of Rangers. Their mission, they were supposed to arrive ashore at 6:30. They were supposed to propulse grappling hooks at the top of the cliffs. They were supposed to climb the cliffs on rope ladders like this. In the initial plan, they were supposed to be helped by the ladders of the firemen of London, but as you can imagine, in the madness of the moment, it was totally impossible to use. But that was the plan, okay? We can continue the visit.
Yeah, looks like it. Seen it sur
You see what was dense as this at that time, okay? And so the cows were a big problem as well, you know, because when you pass in front of cows, usually they are staring at you, and by staring at you, they can give your position to your enemy. So the cows were a big problem. But the good thing with the cows is if there are cows, there is no mines. You can see the and so I just want to tell you a little bit about the casemates. So you know that in 1942 the course of the war changed totally. You have 3 big Allies victories that changed the course of the war: Stalingrad in USSR, Midway in the Pacific, and the second Battle of El Alamein in Northern Africa. So at that moment, the Germans start to totally lose the advantage. They became more and more defensive, especially on the coastal bases. And so in 1943, the German General Rommel, Erwin Rommel, this is him. He was in charge of all the German defenses in Europe. He came to visit this base and he realized that the 6 cannons were too much exposed to the sky. So he ordered the construction of 6 pillboxes like this one to set up the guns inside to protect them. But they didn't have the time to finish the construction of the bunkers because in the beginning of 1944, the Allies bombed this place. So this is the state of the point block after the bombings of April. The majority of the craters that you can see around you were due to those bombings. And so with those bombings, the Allies managed to destroy one of the 6 cannons. So the Germans start to panic a little bit and they decided to hide the 5 other cannons in the countryside. And they replaced the real cannons by fake cannons. Just made of wooden poles. Okay? Well, apparently from the sky you cannot tell the difference. And what's a little bit sad about the fake cannons, you know, the French resistance heard about the fact that the guns were replaced and they tried to prevent Eisenhower and the headquarters of the Allied forces. But they chose not to tell the Rangers that the guns were replaced because they were afraid that they lose some motivation to the mission. So unfortunately, when the Rangers arrived at the top of the cliffs, they didn't find directly the 5 cannons. But they managed, by following some tracks on the ground as if something was dragged, to find the cannons hidden in the countryside just right there. So it was more difficult than expected once again. And so 225 Rangers were sent. The base was supposed to be kept by 100 German soldiers, but they had time to recruit. So there were finally 250 German soldiers to defend the base. So more than 70. Was on an axe inside, able to rotate and shoot people. No, not really, except it's missing somewhere. So I just finished the timing and I will let you visit. The bunker just behind you, you have to imagine it was a sort of sleeping room. So of course there are no beds anymore, but you have to imagine something like that. 3 lines of beds hanged on the ceiling. Okay? And so just about the timing, I was telling you that the Rangers were supposed to arrive at 6:30, but once again, due to the currents, to the bad weather, they had to be on 40 minutes. And unfortunately, a few things went wrong. First, they lose their ammunition in the sea, the majority of their ammunition. Unfortunately, when the reinforcement arrived, they had some friendly fires. 4 Rangers died. They didn't have the opportunity to send the signal to the reinforcements. So the 5th Battalion was sent in Beach instead, thinking that it was a failure, and it took 2 days for the 5th Battalion to arrive at the bunker. So they had to wait 2 days before the reinforcements arrived. And one last thing, all the ropes of the grappling hooks and the ropes of the ladders became so heavy because of the wet and the water that they were not able to throw them to the top anymore. So they had to climb the cliffs with their daggers and their blades. And you're going to realize the highness of the cliffs. It's about 100 feet. Wow. But the colonel in charge of the 2nd Battalion of Rangers, his name was James Schroeder. Maybe it sounds familiar for Texan people because he was from Texas. And in college station was a tower that called which is the exact size of the and so I will let you visit a little. Over there, this is the German observation post. It's the last place where the last German tourists stood. The base was taken at night, so it was a quick battle actually. 2 hours it was taken. But they managed to make the German soldiers out of the command post by throwing a thermite grenade into the ventilation system. So if you visit the observation post, take a look at the ceiling and you will see that it was completely burned. Okay? And the monument that you can see, that represents the dagger of the Rangers with the blade stuck in the observation post. Okay? And you can see that it was commemorated by Ronald Reagan for the first time in 1994. And so I was telling you that 225 Rangers were sent. After the battle, there were only 90 still able to do. So, and so the base does like a loop. So if you go this way,
Okay. I'll come back and take a video.
Ce sera pour autre chose. Ouais.
So they were looking at the there out. That's just a good perspective with the creek to it. I was saying the Carmine, that was definitely.
Once you go across the corridor, that's the room where used to be a machine gun checking the entrance. If you go on the right, you had a bit of storage space, but also the banking for the 9 artillery specialists. Right here would be the common room with the maps and calculations. So this guy is also very but let's focus on this room right now. Right there, the black room into the action of the back. Right
Oh, wait, let's wait.
do a map of all the war cemeteries in Normandy. So we are there we are here in Colville-sur-Mer. I don't know if you remember this morning on the road we passed by the German cemetery of Lacombe. So you have to know that in the very beginning, before the construction of this cemetery, the American soldiers were temporarily buried with the German soldiers in Lacombe. It was temporary, of course. It was something like that. So you can see the white crosses in the front were the American soldiers and the poles on the back were the German soldiers. And when they started to build this cemetery in 1945, they asked the families of the soldiers if they wanted the bodies of the soldiers shipped back in the US or buried in Normandy. And more than 60% of the families choose to ship back the bodies. And they are now buried in Arlington, near Washington. But here you can still count 9,387 soldiers buried. That's a lot.
Wow.
And I just wanted to show you this house. So it's like the Point York. It's maintained by the American Battle Monument Commission, and more specifically by a superintendent. So this is where he lives. To be the superintendent, you have to be a US citizen and you have to be a veteran. There are two conditions. You are elected by the Congress and you're in charge for 4 years. Okay, we can enter this way. So you can see the way that the trees are cut. It's actually in purpose. It's to symbolize the fact that the lives of the soldiers was cut short by the way. Okay? So we're gonna go.
You gotta go to the military field. Well, I was trying to go. Because now, you're not even touching the ground.
Yeah, so I don't know why this
You have no you have no perception, but it's like this. So you are hanging sideways.
Wow, that's how you get those.
Everybody's there? Okay. So they are all soldiers who died during World War II, except 4 civilians. They were journalists and they died covering the war. You also have 4 women. One was from the Red Cross, Elizabeth Richardson, and she died in a plane crash on her way back to the US.
Wow.
And the 3 others, they were from the Postal Service and they died in Bangkok. But all the others were soldiers who died during World War II, except one. I'm going to show you his grave. And so on the engravings of the tombstones, they are on the other side, facing motherland. America is this way. You will find the name of the soldier, his date of death, his rank, and the state where he was from. But you will not find the date of birth because actually, at the end of the war, they realized that a lot of soldiers lied on their age. They were too young to be enrolled, so they decided not to mention the date of birth. And so they are all under crosses, but you can also find 157 stars of David. You have just one right there and one over there. Okay? And so, as you can see, the plot is closed. But you know, sometimes they open some plots, they close other one, and they change. So like that, the grass stay a little bit green everywhere. But around June 6th and the celebration, they open everything. But at the back of the cemetery, if you want, you will be allowed to go on the grass. Oh, over there, you can see people on the grass if you want to have a look. But of course, if you know someone, you are allowed to cross the fences. with a member of the staff usually, and they make a little ceremony. They give you some sand from Omaha Beach, and you have to rub the sand on the engravings, and that makes the name of the soldier standing out the white marble. Explanation about Omaha Beach, because we are on a good point of view, even if it's high tide, so you cannot really see the sand, the beach, but you have to imagine that it can be 800 yards. So once again, they were supposed to arrive at low tide to avoid all the obstacles, but low tide, that represents 800 yards to go through under the German fire. So big difficulty. And so do you remember this morning we were talking about Utah and the fact that the bombings before the landing were really accurate. This is the total opposite on Omaha Beach. The planes get stuck in the clouds, they could not see any of their targets, they missed all their targets, they dropped the bombs a few seconds too late. So unfortunately, when the first wave of men arrived, all the German defenses were returning fire. So you have to imagine that 90% of the first wave died directly in the very first minute, especially on the west part of the beach. You know, the big difficulty was due to the size of the beach. So Omaha Beach, it's almost 5 miles long, and you can clearly see that there were only 5 exits to this beach. And the first objective for the soldiers was, of course, to be able to break the front line, pass behind the German defenses. But as you can see, each exit was too heavily defended by the German defenses, so they were impossible to use. So the mission for the soldiers was to be able to create by themselves a passage through the front line. So the first wave arrived at 6:30. They only managed to create the first passage at 9:30. So during 3 hours, the soldiers get stuck on the beach under the fire, wave of soldiers arriving after wave of soldiers without absolutely any shelters. So you can imagine the amount of soldiers stuck on the beach. When I say one wave of soldiers, that represents 1,400 soldiers who arrive every 40 minutes. So you can imagine the amount. And so at 9:30, they finally create a first breach over there. So they were able to empty a little bit the beach, but the battle only finished at 4 in the afternoon with the taken of the Wilderstandness 62. It's just right there, actually. You cannot see it from...
The flag? For the flag?
Oui, that's it.
Yep.
And so inside this German defense was a German soldier called Heinrich Severloh. He was nicknamed the Beast of Omaha because we assume that by himself he killed more than 1,000 American soldiers by shooting from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. non-stop like a beast. He survived the war, he made a few years in prison. After prison he came back in Germany and he wanted to write a book about the landing, and at that moment he became like best friend with a soldier, an American soldier from the 1st Division who landed just in front of him, and they finally wrote the book together. It's called Wilderstandnes 62. And so, you see, due to the size of the beach, they had to send 2 divisions. So on the western part of the beach, it was the 29th Division, the blue and grays. They were young boys from mostly from Maryland and Virginia, and they were totally inexperienced. On the eastern part, so this part, it was the first one, also called the Big Red One. They were experienced soldiers because they already landed in Italy, in Sicily or in Northern Africa, so they knew a little bit more what they were doing. But on the western part, they paid a big price, and also because once again, due to the currents, everybody was deported to the east, and that left the western part of the beach not enough. So 34,000 soldiers landed here on the day, and you can count 10% of casualties. So nothing to do with the damage. Right. You don't have any questions? This grave. So can you see the first row of tombstones? The second on the right, you can see the engravings are darker. This is Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who led the men on Utah Beach. The engravings are golden because he's a recipient of the politician in the US. Theodore Roosevelt Jr.
Oh, Junior.
Ouais.
Okay, yeah.
Ouais. C'est difficult to pronounce.
Teddy.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Jr.
Oui, it's easier like this. And so you only have 3 medals of honor in this cemetery. They choose to give one per division. So for the first it was Teddy Roosevelt, for the first Jimmy Montes, and for the 29 Perigori. And so I was telling you that the organization was totally random, except for one thing: the siblings and the relatives. They are allowed to be buried side by side. And on his left, on the corner, this is Quentin Roosevelt, his little brother. He died during World War I. He was a pilot and he died in the north of France in 1918. But this is the only exception, okay? And in this cemetery, you can count 50 pairs of brothers buried side by side, and one father and son. Wow. Wait.
One father and son.
Wait. By example, you have the brother who inspired the movie Saving Private Ryan. They are called the Island Brothers, so the real story is a little bit less dramatic than the movie, but it's still terrible. There were 4. One was missing in the Pacific, 2 died in Normandy, so they shipped back the last one to his family. But fortunately, at the end of the war, they realized that the one missing in the Pacific was actually only made prisoner, so he came back to his family as well. But the 2 Island brothers who died in Normandy are buried just so I would let you visit a little bit by yourself. If you want to go on the grass, you can go there.
Fifteen seconds before 4. So they're lowering that other side and raising this one. Both raising.
this is going to be fun too, trying to tell you.
So
Today it's just a public beach. In the sand, the sand, the sand. Washing my feet, walking on the sand. Another part of the reason I picked it because it caught that twig stick.
Omaha Beach of Normandy.
Amazing how hard the sand is. Think about that. I've been to a beach where the waves weren't crashing 5 feet away from me. The sand was this hard. Credit got here, I'm with it.